Hello there, how are you? Do you want to go where you want to go and do what you want to do with whoever you want to do it? This song's been in my head for a long time because it's in a documentary called Echo in the Canyon, which is about the whole Laurel Canyon music scene in the mid-1960s. Specifically, it's like
65 to 67.
Yeah, it's a very small little window of time. And it's also looking at a specific kind of music where it's multiple singers, multiple songwriters, groups like the Mamas and the Papas and the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield and the Beach Boys are in there too.
The Association.
And the Monkees.
Well, they mentioned the Monkees.
They live there.
Right, but they only mention the Monkees.
Okay, I haven't seen the movie. Here's my question. How do you make a movie about the canyon and not include Joni Mitchell?
They do mention her.
Okay, but she's not in it.
Because her house is Our House. Her house is the inspiration for the Crosby, Stills and Nash song, Our House.
I didn't even catch that they mentioned her.
They do. It's somewhere in passing. And they mention Frank Zappa in passing.
Because she is the lady of the canyon.
Yes, they do. They do. So this is directed by Andrew Slater, who was a longtime record executive. He was a president of Capitol Records. He's a longtime music manager. He has managed like Don Henley and the Go-Go's and Jacob Dylan and the Wallflowers. And so this whole project, I know a lot about this, by the way, I should just say, because I did a big segment on this movie for the Spectrum News 1 show that I work on, the SoCal Scene. So I interviewed Andrew Slater and Jacob Dylan at the guitar store in Santa Monica, where they do the Tom Petty interview. One thing that's really cool about this is that they had the last interview with Tom Petty before he died. And he's not part of this scene, but he's
influenced by
He is emblematic of the enduring influence of this sound. And he was a teenager growing up in Florida when these bands were all really big.
He's in the Brian Wilson doc, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times.
Okay.
He talks about trying to recreate the opening notes of, I forget which Beach Boy song, and then realizing that it was actually three different guitar tracks laid over each other. Yes. So there was no way to do it by yourself.
He talks about winning a copy of Pet Sounds. That's a fun story.
But that song, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, is one of the many songs that they do covers of. So this whole thing began life as a concert and an album. And Jacob Dylan had amassed all these artists like Fiona Apple and Beck and Cat Power to do a concert at the Orpheum here in LA in 2015. And then that became an album, and then they wanted to explore this topic further, and so that became this documentary. And because Andrew Slater and Jacob Dylan have both been around for so long and are so respected, they were able to get this incredible array of musicians to tell their stories. And so they get David Crosby and Stephen Stills and Graham Nash, and they get Neil Young, kinda. I would like to have seen more Neil.
But they don't
not
actually,
together, of course.
Well,
They're never together.
But they don't talk to Neil.
They don't. They have him perform at some point.
Right.
And they have Michelle Phillips comes and talks, and Brian Wilson and Eric Clapton, and
I'm sure they're like, hey, Dylan's kid is making a movie.
And what's his name from the Byrds?
Roger McGuinn.
Roger McGuinn.
He's in it. And
they talk to Lou Adler.
Yeah, Lou Adler's in it. And everyone they have amazing stories to tell. And like David Crosby especially is so astute at, not surprisingly, being the songwriter that he is, at really explaining what the allure was of this. Because prior to these bands all coming onto the scene, it was really poppy, quick songs with really simplistic, catchy lyrics that rhymed about love and things like that. And these people were singing about more poetic stuff. As he put it, they were putting poetry on the radio. And so you have many, many layers of things going on. This is my chief complaint about it is that I think they're trying to get their arms around too much here. This is Andrew Slater's first film, and he's clearly in love with this topic and in love with this music and these people. And so you have the interviews, and then you have the concert, and then you have recording. So Jacob Dylan will go into the studio with Norah Jones to sing Never My Love. And then you have just a bunch of people sitting around on a couch at Andrew Slater's house looking through album covers and talking about these songs. And then they have a whole other element of a Jacques Demy film called Model Shop.
Yes.
Have you seen that, Alonso?
I know of it. I've
Okay, so it's about a guy who comes to LA and falls in love with it through the eyes of Laurel Canyon and what a rich, fertile, creative place it was. And so you also have scenes from Model Shop laid into this, and you have archival footage from the time, and so which is cool.
Like Jacob
sometimes.
Dylan driving around the same way the guy in Model Shop is driving around.
Right.
Like it gets to be a little much.
It is, and so
Did they talk about the movie Laurel Canyon?
No, they don't. Because this is about that period in the 60s. And sometimes it's really cool. Like you have Michelle Phillips going back to the same studio where the Mamas and the Papas recorded a bunch of songs to go back and look at it today. If you love this music, which you do not,
right.
I know.
If you love this music, you're going to like this movie because it celebrates, like, it's almost like how many people can celebrate this music and celebrate their take on this music, and the people that are directly influenced, even at a second generation level, how much can they love this music? And we'll show, like, look, these folks like Beck and Regina Spektor and Cat Power basically doing the same thing these guys were doing. Like, okay, great. Right.
And actually, at the LA opening of this film this weekend, there is going to be a concert with a bunch of those folks.
Thanks for the warning.
Cinerama Dome.
All weekend long, actually, at the Dome and at the Landmark. If you're here in LA and listening to this weekend, they're going to do shows at both places throughout the whole long weekend.
I mean, I haven't seen the film yet. I do like this music, but I am reaching my saturation point of like baby boomer hagiography documentaries.
That's what this totally is. Like, it's like
we were so awesome.
And we had
changed the world.
We changed the world. We had music like no one ever had, and no one had ever done anything like this. And it
sucks.
And it's
they're not saying it sucks, but they're saying that what they did influences what is good now.
Oh, okay, great.
And then Charles Manson went up the canyon, and
right.
But they don't
Ruined
really,
everything.
yeah. But they don't really talk about that. But that clearly is like the end of the
60s,
the glory time.
I'll be more
in this
interested
era.
in seeing the David Crosby doc when that comes out.
That's coming out soon,
right?
too.
Because I feel like that's going to be a more honest take on him, and like there's a ton of stuff gets left out of this, and that's what kind of bothered me about this. Is like, I'll admit, like, I'm not a huge fan of this music. This is not stuff that I really particularly gravitate to. And I get it. Like, when you're doing a movie about these musicians and celebrating them, you're not going to touch on the Wrecking Crew. But there's
because they've already had their own movie.
Sure. But if you haven't seen that movie, you're going to come away from this thinking that whole sound is created by the musicians that they talk to. And the reality is, it's more about Lou Adler and his usage of the Wrecking Crew that made that sound. And on the Byrds' first big hit, Tambourine Man, McGuinn's the only one that gets to play on that because Adler didn't think any of the rest of them of that band were good enough to play. And so that's the Wrecking Crew and Paul McGuinn doing that. And Roger McGuinn, sorry, I keep thinking Paul McGann. Roger McGuinn playing on that. And again, like, so when we talk about hagiography, like, it leaves out a bunch of stuff that I think touches on the reality that you had these much more talented musicians that were really and the irony is like when the Monkees get called out for that, like, well, shit, that's what everybody else was doing too. And they all somehow dodged that bullet. Now that's not to say there's nothing interesting in here, but when Crosby does an interesting thing where he talks about that, bands are tough and eventually people go on to do their solo work, and you have these bands break up and everybody goes off into their own direction and do their solo work. And that's arguably where it gets more interesting and less than the band stuff. But that's not far off what happens with jazz in the 40s and then 50s, because all the big bands broke up and then you had all these solo players start their own careers. Yeah, this one, it's okay. And again, like, if you're someone like me who's not that interested into this music, I think there's not a lot here. I did think it was interesting. To me, one of the more fascinating things is when Regina Spektor kind of says, and I ended up writing this down, she said the lyrics and the sound at that time are more dreamy. And there's a lyrical, dreamy, poetic quality that previously a lot of the songs were written more from a more conscious thought, right? Okay. Because when some of them talk about, like, there's poetry in here that no one had ever heard on the radio and nobody was doing, I was like, okay, let's completely ignore, like, Cole Porter, right? Like, there were, let's be honest, there were great songwriters prior to that, right? And so there's a little bit of, like, the attitude that no one had ever written proper songs before. It's like, okay, come on.
We invented the wheel.
Right. And it's a little like, it's very self-congratulatory.
It is. And I would assume that everybody who said, yes, we'd be happy to sit down with you, had the expectation that it would be congratulatory.
No, and I get
also,
it.
Jacob Dylan, I mean, for better and for worse, is not a journalist. And so he's not asking them tough questions. Having said that, these people open up to him because they view him as a peer. And he was able to get, personal stuff out of them that maybe like I wouldn't be able to as just random nosy girl asking questions. My quibble with it is the way those interviews are often set up. It's like a 2-shot, and they're kind of like side by side, and they're like turning to each other. And then there's a camera on each person individually, but some of the structures are kind of awkward. Like he talks to Ringo Starr, and they're just standing next to a car in front of a house, like a really cool, like mid-century modern 60s looking
Ringo's
house.
Like, you can't come into my house.
And Ringo Starr, you can stand next to my car, but you cannot get in it.
I'll give you 20 minutes outside. We'll stand by the car.
Yes, baby, you can't drive my car.
Your dad knows what he did.
So that is maybe just because this is his first film. There's not a lot of innovation necessarily as far as how these interviews are structured. But then once people get talking, those stories are pretty great. I do like this music, and I was raised on it. My dad came out to LA from New York around the same time that like the Mamas and the Papas and bands like that were. And so I grew up listening to Crosby, Stills and Nash and the Beach Boys, and he taught me how to sing and harmonize to those bands. And so I have a lot of fond memories from my childhood of that music, and that's probably part of why I responded to this the way I did. But it is trying to do too much and get its arms around too much. Like the model shop footage is evocative, but it's like a whole nother complicating layer that seems unnecessary to me. Anyway, I'm saying 7.2.
I'm saying, 5.5?
Yes. Yeah. If you like this kind of thing, you'll like this kind of thing. It's a 6.4 from us. It's at 100% on the tomato meter. So check it out.
High.
There you go. All right. Thanks for watching. Like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And do go visit patreon.com/BeFastAllDay to check out all of the wonderful extra content that we provide solely to our subscribers. Exclusive stuff like trailer recaps and TV discussions and news and all kinds of other things. So check it out, won't you?
Yes, please do. We have some Fosse Verdon talk today. And then next week on Monday is my a la carte interview with Madeline Brand, who we're all friends with, longtime NPR anchor, host of Press Play on KCRW here in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica specifically. And she's great, and we have great talks about how she got her start, and she's a painter.
Go ahead. No, did she tell you her original radio name?
Madam Baum. Yes. Nice. And so she had a college radio name. So she's a really cool, smart woman, and I felt lucky to sit down with her for a little bit and ask her the questions.
Yes.
Turn the tables on Madeline. So that's coming out on Monday. So please stick around for that. And thanks, and head on over to Patreon now. Bye.